Hey, what's up, guys? This is Grayson, the Dean221 Nichols, and today we're doing a little change of scenery. I wanted to do this week's episode outside because we have a pretty nice day outside in Florida today, so wanted to switch it up a little bit. But here we are with the second episode from the Fantastic Five of the newest series on Poker After Dark running at the moment. We got the same five, hence the title from last week, headlined by Matt Berkey, Lynn G, Sam Soverel, Jake Daniels, and James Romero. Got a few tough live players, online players, just got a good mix here, and they've been kind of battling it out. Last night's episode was a little slow at some points, to be honest, especially compared to some of these high stakes poker episodes we've all been watching every Wednesday night with Tom Dwan and the likes. So this has been a little more tame, but I found this hand to be quite fascinating. So I really wanted to come on here and talk about it with you guys this week. So let me set the stage again for those who weren't watching last week. The blinds are 5,100 and they're occasionally running a straddle. Everyone sat with somewhere around 10K on average, some up to a 20. And like I said, 5,100. And in this spot, we're going to jump right in. Lynn, Matt, and James all fold, and the action comes to Jake in the small blind. And Jake goes ahead and completes with the ace-6, and Sam checks. So I think for starters here, I think both players could have easily raised in this spot. I think Jake could have raised, and I do like Jake's limp here, though. I think it makes his hand a little bit more concealed, the ace high, just limping in and playing it inconspicuously here. But I definitely think Sam could raise. I was kind of surprised to see Sam knuckle back there and just check and see the flop. But again, same argument. When he checks back there, his hand is fairly well disguised. So on later streets, if he hits a king or a jack, he might actually get paid, which will come into play later on. Remember that. So flop comes out king, king, 10, two diamonds. Monster flop for Sam. Flops the trips. He's got backdoor diamonds as well. And Jake does have the backdoor nut diamond draw. Jake goes ahead and leads out for 100, to which Sam immediately raises to 300. And I think both plays are fine here, and Jake calls, which also makes sense with his backdoor draw, and I think he assumes that Sam might be raising on semi-bluff often as well. And if Sam had a semi-bluff like Queen Jack, or maybe smaller diamonds, Jake could be in good shape. So I like both their plays here, makes sense. Turn brings a 10, giving Sam the boat and giving Jake two pair at the ace kicker. Jake checks. Sam also checks back here, which I think is pretty interesting. It makes sense, I think if he bets here against a lesser opponent, maybe it makes, the idea is you might draw them, make them fold their flush draw, which obviously you don't want them to fold at this point since you already have your boat. So his check back here makes sense. I think against some opponents where there's a leveling war going on, I would think that maybe Sam would sometimes barrel here to make it look like perhaps he was semi-bluffing and hope that his opponent actually had the 10 and would now never fold. So I could see an argument for Sam betting here, but I also understand why he would check. This is where it gets really weird. So the river is, of course, the river of all rivers. We get the 10 ball here. So now there's about 900 in the middle, and Jake fires out 4,000 here. So he bets over 4 times the pot in this spot. And the announcer says, oh, here goes Sam into the tank, doing his little Hollywood routine. 30 seconds maybe that Sam thinks. And then he tosses in the muck. He folds here. So I was pretty surprised by this one, but I was thinking about it afterwards. So that's why I was like, let's go on here and make a little video and talk to everyone about this, see what everyone else thinks. So, at first I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like there's some rule in Hold'em tournaments. You just don't see people fold boats, right? It's like a thing I like to exploit against worse players, bet big when we have a boat because we know they're not going to be able to fold. Like it's just not something you see often, right? However, when you get to this next level where there's really tough players playing against other tough players, I think you have this interesting dynamic going, like a he thinks, I think type situation, the third level of poker, right? And so this is a spot where a lot of people with a 10 would conceivably bet 4 times the pot, right? Because the idea is that they think Sam can never fold a king here. And if Sam doesn't have a king, you're not going to get paid that much anyway, right? So from a good player, I think this 4K ends up being a 10 a lot more than it's a bluff. And if it's a bluff, well, let's talk about what his bluffs might look like, right? Probably missed diamonds or maybe a missed straight draw, right? Well, look what Sam's holding. Sam has the jack of diamonds, which blocks the jack queen, the jack 9, the ace jack. It blocks so many of the missed straight draws, right? So those aren't out there. And then it also blocks a lot of the missed flush draws too, right? So having that jack of diamonds in Sam's hand makes it so much less likely that Jake has a lot of the hands that he might be bluffing with here, right? Which suddenly means that Jake's range is more heavily weighted towards value bets, which will be either the case king or the quad 10. And look at the sizing. Why would Jake bet 4,000 with the king here? There's nothing for Sam to call with that's worse, right? It doesn't make sense. He bet something like 1,000, hopes Sam called with the board, like that would make sense, right? But not this sizing. So after you break it down, it actually kind of looks like Jake would be skewed more towards a 10 with this 4.3x pot size bet that he chooses on the river. And now it's not crazy to see Sam Soverel, one of the best players in the world. Definitely recommend checking out some of his tournament runs. The guy's a machine, and I can see why he was able to fold it. In 30 seconds. At first, I was like, "Whoa, How's he letting this go?" But upon further analysis, it kind of makes sense. When your other opponent is strong, and you can predict what their bluffs look like and what their value looks like. Well, suddenly you're getting in a spot, and you're like, if I call here, I need to be right like 80% of the time for this to make sense. And that's just not going to happen here. There's no way Jake has bluffs over 3/4 of the time here. So really cool hand. Awesome fold by Sam in the long run. Granted, it wasn't correct here because Jake was just getting out of line like he has been this whole episode. But I do think long run, I think that's a hell of a fold from Mr. Sam Soverel. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and hope you all enjoyed that hand. Check us out on the Elite Rounders YouTube channel with new episodes every week. Best of luck this week, guys. Talk to you soon.